think she might have declined it.
Okay.
I think she's out of town, actually.
Okay. All right, and I don't know if Steve is joining, but I guess we can just get started. So approval of the minutes from last time. Motion to approve.
I'll move.
Okay.
Or I'll second. Are you motioning? Sorry. Yes, I'll second.
Okay. And all for?
Aye.
Any against? No. Okay. Okay.
Oh, actually, you know what? Can we reopen for a second? There was some now I'm stuck forever, right? I did notice that I was in there as the IDEA representative from governance.
Yep.
Who stuck me there?
That is not
you,
a mistake, because it's not me.
Oh man.
And that's
logged off early, Jason.
You left early. That's what happened.
Uh-huh. That's why Sheldon and Cindy conspired. Fine. Okay.
Heavy as the crown.
Okay. Succession process. Cindy, did you want to talk about that? I mean, I think we pretty much came to agreement on it last time.
We just codified the discussion that we had during our last meeting with confirmation from the Office of the Governor that the only people who need to go through an official confirmation process are members of the public, designees, or representatives from specific organizations can just be chosen from within that organization. And although they appreciate our letting them know, and they did give us a template email that would copy them in on the information from the organization, that is not required. It is just helps formalize the process and makes it a little easier for them to track who's been appointed to commissions around the state. So we have all of that information filed now and have it available for future changes.
Okay. I didn't know, and this kind of like goes into the IGA area. But I didn't know if we wanted to kind of have some kind of statement or like pledge or something that people would need to acknowledge our, the value statement and the vision, and, like when they join, if there's new members coming on and they join, they would need to kind of acknowledge these things in like a pledge to agree to keep these thoughts at the forefront of decision making, because they wouldn't have been around for all the sessions and all the work that we've been doing. So that was just a thought that I had in that IDA work document. I kind of wrote up like just a brief line that would kind of state that, and this is just an idea and doesn't need to be done, but I was just trying to think of ways to always be keeping this top of mind, because I think that if we don't, it won't happen in the way that we want it to.
I really like the idea, and if we're in agreement, I would say we can probably bring it up at the next commission meeting. Make sure that the commission as a whole is in favor.
Yeah, I mean, I had that idea on, just individual people, like our individual commission members kind of taking this pledge or at least acknowledging in some way. And I had also an idea of perhaps kind of like people do like land acknowledgements, but to open meetings with a certain acknowledgement, a certain statement each time that just like reiterates these thoughts. And so kind of like brings focus to this.
Are we doing that? Are we doing land acknowledgements? I haven't seen any of those yet.
No. I'm saying in the same vein, or like with that in mind, I was just thinking of how we could have like maybe an opening statement in the beginning of meetings. And I don't know if it makes sense or not. I was thinking the same thing on the website, like on the homepage of our website, I don't see anything related to, inclusion or the idea that like this is should be our main focus or a large focus. So I didn't know if there was a statement that existed or if we wanted to.
I'm wondering, I really like the idea. I'm wondering, this might be splitting hairs, but we've used the language of commitment at Connecticut Humanities. We have an IDEA commitment that we lay out in terms of acknowledging the history, but also, our responsibility to the people today and in the future. And I wonder if that might be something, Cindy or Sheldon, if you could share with this group to look at, consider. We don't need to necessarily lift it word for word, but it might be a template from which, we can sort of think about or propose to the commission.
Yeah, and this is very long. I'm throwing in a comment, the kind of the values statement that we did get the commission to, because this is long, but I think if we cut it down, we could use that as this statement. And then I'll do the same with the Connecticut Humanities.
Yeah. Something similar, but I think what's different is that the value statement is geared toward people who might be holding their own events. Like it's something we're putting out to others saying, hey, you guys should do this, as opposed to something that says we are committed to doing X, Y, and Z as a commission.
Yeah.
And that's the only difference that I think, because otherwise, and I think I think it's kind of important to recognize that, there are many different thoughts and feelings around this, and we need to recognize that and keep that in mind.
May I reflect on that?
Yeah.
Briefly. So I want to be thoughtful. I want to be sensitive. I understand, and I've seen, different land acknowledgements in different venues and forums. This body is to celebrate the formation of the United States of America, and we want to have a lot of participation from the widest scope possible, I would imagine, including the different municipalities. And, first we were a colony, and then we were a state. And like, we have many generations of veterans, many generations of farmers and landowners. History of the legislature is farmer landowners. That's why it's a short session. And I just want to be sensitive to all of those people who are probably going to be the main active participating folks who are going to want to be involved in a group like CT 250 celebrating the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America. So, you know, I just want to express that sensitively and with all due respect if I can, so that if there's a way to find harmony and balance with the goals of the idea, and I'm all for being as inclusive as possible. I'm highly sensitive to the ADA compliance stuff, the conversation that we've had, understanding that different buildings, different places built in the 1600s, 1700s might not be, ADA compliant, but understanding that they still have value and significance and that we want to highlight them fully as much as possible, as inclusively as possible. Cemeteries, things like that. And so oftentimes in these discussions, like it's just I want to say this, as sensitively as possible. Like there's a huge, large, major majority that we want to be, and I'm talking all the cities, all the towns, all the municipalities. We want to be as inclusive of that, especially in a body dedicated to celebrating America and Connecticut and the 250. So if there's a way we can reconcile that as like smoothly and gently as possible, and acknowledging the different things. But like I was mentioning in a previous meeting, Martin Luther King in Simsbury, right? Very like a former royal king, landowner, ultimately freed slave in East Haddam. They're honored. There's all kinds of really positive ways to tell of the vibrant history of Connecticut, of all of its different people, the Nashawtucket Pequots, inviting them and the stuff that they've done, and maybe asking them for their stuff too, their input and feedback on this topic. I want to be making sure that we don't inadvertently turn off and exclude a whole bunch of people, if you follow. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, in my opinion, it seems like there are people who will be involved no matter what. And so I guess our question is, are we making the extra effort to bring in people who wouldn't necessarily be involved, who wouldn't necessarily be interested in this topic? We had a speaker come from the Witness Stones Project, which I think you guys know at Connecticut Humanities. I think you fund them. But for Black History Month the other day, and one of the Secretary of Security actually was not going to go to the presentation. And I said, come on, let's go. And he said, no. He's like, I'm not interested. And somebody else kind of like took him and said, like, just come. And so he came to the presentation and learned about, the people who, slavery in Connecticut and how they're recognizing the stories of slaves here. And at the end, he raised his hand and made a comment and said, I wasn't going to come, but I'm so happy that I did. And you've like opened my mind. And this has always been a top topic. And, so I think that there's ways to like reach out to people and include them, and people who wouldn't necessarily be, think that the topic is for them, or have really strong feelings about it in either a negative way or a somber way, you know.
Yeah. I agree, having an open mind, having an inclusive approach. I'm just thinking out loud, right? Because I only want good outcomes, right? Like if we think that this is CT 250, part of America 250, to celebrate America as the land of opportunity, that's why everyone came here. That's why everyone still wants to come here, because here you can have an opportunity to make a business, make a family, contribute, run for office, have freedom, freedom of speech, all of these other things that don't exist like they do anywhere else in the world, like they exist here. And what's positive about that should be primary, right? I mean, that's why we're doing all this, in my opinion. And I just want to make sure, on behalf of different various constituencies, that it's for everyone. That's what makes it so great. That's all I want to say about it.
Mhm.
It's, so I agree. I do want to challenge that idea a little bit, because we're not just here to celebrate. We're here to, like, the executive order does say we're here to commemorate and recognize the anniversary, not just celebrate. So I want to make sure that we're understanding all the different facets of what that means. And I know we've had a lot of conversations with the commission around the language and terminology that we're using. And most of our materials say commemoration, because we didn't want to really choose sides, I guess, if that's the right word.
I
And
think
so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important, because I was speaking with the secretary's office in New Jersey, and just seeing if they had kind of similar issues around, you know, like with the Native American tribes, and they said it hadn't really come up yet, but that they did choose to use the term commemorate, like specifically for that reason.
So I'll just add and then leave it here. And I completely respect everyone here and all the different diverse opinions that something like this will raise. And I'll just say, this is the Constitution state. And then we have a really cool story with the Charter Oak. It's like over there, the Bushnell Park. And of it, they hid it. They hid the charter. Okay. King George gave us a charter. You can be a colony, have your own authority to do what you want. And he tried to take it away, and we said, no, we're going to hide it from you in this tree over there. We did. And now there's a credit union and a college named after it. Bare minimum. So there's a lot of stuff that happened in between there. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Should we move on to kind of what we were talking about last time around our role as the governance committee and trying to kind of evaluate diversity and representation of other committees and their decision making? I think we kind of got a little bit stuck. So the one idea that we had was potentially creating some kind of, you know, like a list of questions that committees could ask themselves when they're making some key decisions, so that, you know, just to make sure that they are being inclusive. And I don't know if that would be some, like a document that would come back to us to evaluate. Jason, I think you wanted us to be very specific in this. maybe a little more specific than we were being with the questions that we were asking, or making sure that the committees were being held accountable?
Not recalling any of that. Sorry. I must have been absent for that part too. I'm trying to get into this document. It's not, oh, hang on a minute.
So, I mean, Michael, I think, brought up a really good point last time of like, when we're kind of evaluating the diversity and representation of these subcommittees, what are we evaluating them against? Are we taking, Connecticut's population as a whole and the diversity that exists in the state and looking like percentage wise? Is that what we're looking at? Are we just kind of saying, okay, you need to make an effort to, have a diverse committee? And I don't think we came up with an answer.
Yeah, all right. Now I'm remembering a little bit of this.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the effort is important, but the amount of documentation behind that effort, just wondering, if we start getting in percentages of Connecticut's population and who are we including, who are we not including, I mean, that's going to be way beyond my scope to manage. And I'm not sure Cindy's going to like me if I point at her and ask her to do it, but I think there does need to be a concerted effort to keep in mind all the populations that this commission, this state, and we need to serve. And I think through the different commissions that are represented, through the different state commissions that are represented on the 250th commission, I think we do accomplish a lot of that, or at least the forethought to ensure that there's representation broadly. On the commission, we did talk about that, but then the subcommittees allows us to sort of build out our actual representation in other ways. And I don't know if we got to the conversation on how do we get at data on each of the subcommittees, and how are we going to start measuring that? How do we ask them to report out? Is there a survey? I mean, I'm thinking about some of the questions we have internally on staff and on board, and the resistance sometimes to how much we're going to probe and ask for people's sometimes very personal information.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that people might willingly contribute, but other things that are, really are very much private to some people. And I want to respect that without pushing too hard. On the other hand, we could ask for people to volunteer information. This is not mandatory, and we have used in sort of various ways we've collected and surveyed based on some established protocols, like through the American Alliance of Museums and how they collect data. That's all voluntary. That might be the model that we use. We have used it in other places statewide to collect data. We could ask commissioners and subcommittee participants to do that. So I'll lay that out there as a possibility, but I want to be careful about making this mandatory.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we came to a good conclusion last time that we probably shouldn't make it mandatory, because then we couldn't leave it anonymous, and then that is completely public. So,
okay.
Yeah. There's also the question, I think, somebody brought up last time was, is this a personal thing? Is it who you're representing? As you work for the Hispanic Alliance or whatever, or whichever, are you kind of representing the people because of, who you work for? So that's another like way that it could be gone about.
I definitely just want to reflect that, and just reiterating to a certain extent, our commission went through this through the Secretary of State's thoughtful process that we just had, and it was anonymous. We have our commission as a big advisory board. That's one cohort, and then we have individual subcommissions. So I'm the lead aging policy analyst, senior subcommission. That has a certain amount of folks. But each of them together comprise the greater advisory board, and we were able to question them anonymously. So I thought that understanding that that was the statutory obligation of the Secretary of State, that their process anonymously required us to answer it. And I think being in alignment with the Secretary of State's process of anonymous is is probably a thoughtful way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We knew because we were like, oh, this data's hurrying up. Oh my God, we have to pull this out.
I know,
Separate
and
topic.
that was a huge undertaking. But thank you for complying.
Oh, we had a choice? Oh, okay. I didn't know. If I knew that, then me and Warren and Rosemary, the tip at the Trafficking in Human Person Council, and I think he had to do the advisory board. I had to do the Long-Term Care Advisory Council.
Oh my gosh.
Gosh.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, I think we're smaller. I think that's one thing to take into account. So in theory, it would be a little easier to collect the information and share out. So I'm wondering if it is some kind of voluntary anonymous survey, and in addition and this is where it would be really helpful to kind of see the information that the Secretary of the State's office sent out. Because I would love to see how it was framed when this survey was sent out. Because I know that's something that's been a concern for us in the past internally, how we're framing the collection of this type of information. And then I do wonder if there's a way to kind of put together a brief summary of kind of some of the different groups around Connecticut that then once we have the information and we share it out, we can kind of share it with subcommittee chairs and the commission with this is this group, this is the makeup of Connecticut, discuss, and it's not a directive coming from the governance subcommittee, but just like there is this information and this information, how do you feel about that? Which I think is similar to at least the way Merle and John are thinking about their work on the IDEA subcommittee, really reminding us kind of that we care about this and that we need to talk about it and not just ignore it. And that it needs to be on our mind.
Yep. I will try and get more info from Deputy Cozen on how she did, like what she sent out, and how she, the language she used and all of that. So I'll try and get that and send it around to you guys.
Can I just add to, thinking about representation, and, certainly do this when I'm working in tribal communities. I think one of the challenges is, I want to say two things. One is, one person representing one group doesn't comprise the totality of that group. And I think that, multiple seats at the table, thinking about, diverse voices within groups is really important. So I want to just sort of acknowledge that piece. The other part is absent that, because, there's a finiteness to this commission and the subcommittees. And we may have talked about this last time, but I think it's incumbent on us as a commission and subcommittees to build relationships to those groups. And I think that documenting that and making sure that we are actively making an effort to communicate, to engage, to find those pathways will be the way that we ultimately serve Connecticut most effectively. So I think that's probably two sides of the coin on this, but I just think it's important to recognize that relationships are going to matter. They have to center so much of what we do. And while we can't accomplish it with the small numbers that we have directly on the commission, there are other pathways.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. I mean, our office has actively reached out to as many organizations and community groups and all as we could over the past year. And the response that we've gotten is, I think, so much better than previously. I mean, it seemed that it was people were shocked to see us at certain events. They were surprised to hear me, to have an email from me or a phone call from us. It's just not really expected, I think, from, government. And we've gotten just a really good response. So I think there's a lot of appreciation there. I think it goes a long way for, us going out to people. So, like we talked about, I know, Cindy, it's probably a logistical nightmare for you to try and plan like one meeting a year or two outside of Hartford. But I think it would go a really long way. And yeah, I don't know. I saw the list of kind of groups of people that I forget, I think it was the outreach or community engagement subcommittee had made. People that they wanted to kind of actively reach out to. And I don't know if there have been actual organizations or leaders that have been identified, but I think that's a really important next step.
Yeah, and that is the next step for that subcommittee, and it's been a bit of work that's been harder to make happen. But agreed that that's a really important project that needs to move forward.
Because I do think what happens is, you're going to have the DAR and blah, 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 historical society and, like the museum, that there's certain groups of people who are already probably planning things. They're like totally on board. And it's just the others that, like so many others who don't know that this is happening or,
I think, Aria, and you mentioned last time, if I recall, having our meeting at the Pequot Museum or some sort of tribal centric location. I'm thinking too, just planting a seed, not necessarily to be hosted at the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History, but they do have a program called the Connecticut Cultural Heritage Arts Program that engages very diverse communities and has sort of funded through Connecticut Humanities in their own work, various projects around cultural traditions. So thinking there might be sort of a place where we invite those community members and their families, or more widely, like, here's a way to engage a broader audience that may not be sort of in our maybe more obvious orbits.
Yeah.
But I think we need to keep them in mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I think we have a plan for kind of evaluating like representation on the subcommittees and yeah, on the subcommittees. In terms of evaluating the inclusion of marginalized communities in decision-making processes, this is where we talked about having maybe some questions that the subcommittees could answer on that document that was connected to the agenda. We have a few questions listed, like which underrepresented communities did we take into consideration in this decision? How did we solicit input, and from whom specifically? How are we reacting to and incorporating the feedback that we did receive? Do we still like this idea of kind of presenting these questions that the subcommittees would need to answer for like major decisions?
And I don't know. This is more of a process question. So I still like this idea. Are we okay with developing this framework and then not really policing it necessarily, but like sharing it with subcommittees and just, I think we can remind them periodically that it's there, but I don't think we need them to necessarily give us the answers to this, or is that what we're thinking?
I would concerned about policing it too much, but I do think we need, and maybe that's a report out or a summary document that subcommittee chairs.
You cut out for a second there, Jason. I kind of missed.
So I was saying, basically, I don't think we need to police it, but I do think that we need to report out on some level to document, the work. I don't think it needs to be long. I think it should accomplish what we're asking here, so that we can document the efforts for the public. I mean, we are saying we're doing this work. I think we need to demonstrate we're doing this work.
Well, and so I do think that's fair. These meetings are all recorded. So in theory, it should be taking place during the meeting. So there should be a recording, and at least in the minutes, but I agree that there should be some reference to it.
Does it simplify things, Cindy, if somebody is sort of just summarizing and submitting to you sort of a centralized document, so you could at least report out somewhere and it's in one place? I'm just thinking about we need to sort of aggregate this information and do sort of a check-in, at least in total, to say, yeah, we accomplished this. No, there's still gaps there. We need to do better work here. We need to build that relationship. I'm just not sure. I don't want to be the police, but at the same time, we need to have a process in place that's natural and intuitive, I think.
Yeah.
And not cumbersome.
How do the other subcommittees work? Do they, are one of you from Connecticut Humanities always on those meetings and okay, so Cindy, you're in every single one of the meetings, and so
And I am trying to join more regularly, but I can't be there for everyone.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. That said, different meetings are different levels of chat. This is an easy group because we're small. And
Yeah.
I think very much on the same page. I think some of the other groups are larger, have a lot more people participating, which is always harder to wrangle and so I will say that.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess if there are major decisions being made within the committee, they'll have this list of questions and their secretary, their chair, whoever will need to work with the rest of the committee to answer the questions and then send it along to you so that at any point it's almost like you could like spot check here and there. It's not like we would police every single decision, but there would be a record. So if we needed to go back, we could.
Yeah. I think that's fair and can stress that we're not grading them on the like bullet points are fine. You don't need to write an essay explaining the answer to these questions, but just like to trace the conversation or however we want to think about it.
Yep. And I think that I mean, like ideally it's helpful to them too, to just have something to reference where, you know, they can make it top of mind more easily. All right. How do you want to do that? Do we need like a document? Could this just be included in the next agenda for the next big meeting?
So I think the hope is that after this conversation, we'll submit these ideas to John and Merle.
Okay.
And I think
Yeah.
they will kind of decide on how to report. They'll aggregate all of the different subcommittee information and then report out on the information to the broader group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. All right. So the next point that we were assigned says consider accessibility and governance practices, such as providing robust accommodations for commission meetings, materials to ensure full participation. I mean, it seems like you guys are already doing that.
I'm glad it seems it. I don't feel like we really are, because I can't tell you if anyone would like a large print version of the agenda or if there's some other way that we could do something small to make everyone feel more comfortable. And I also don't know if we can do some stuff like, would microphones be helpful in a meeting because sometimes it's hard to hear one another? It's possible, but I also don't know if given that room, it would be possible, like it would be feasible.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really great reminder that we probably should have something in place to ask people or to to figure out what accommodations we can provide and see if it would be helpful. And I think if we start to model that behavior, it will be helpful for other groups that are hosting their own events to see what that looks like.
Is it appropriate if we ask John to provide that kind of guidance for this? I mean, what are best practices in this kind of environment? He lives and breathes this in his work, in his life, in his role. I think it would be particularly helpful. I know Lisa on our staff has been really thinking about, she's our ADA compliance coordinator more recently. And so thinking about, upgrades to our website, so that there is large print resource and so on. But I don't want to be caught in the we don't know what we don't know world when we have the ability to figure it out and we have the people and the resources to do so.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. We don't know, but I do think that this is a good reminder that we should be asking how and then doing it. Because I will say John was instrumental at the first meeting to getting us to make the CT 250 website accessible in different type sizes and like high contrast and stuff like that. And it was a fairly easy fix. I say that because Lisa had to do all the work. But
So,
we
so
were
on
able
behalf
to,
of, sorry, Cindy.
I was going to
finish.
say we were able to turn it around in 2 weeks, so it wasn't too hard.
So I wonder if it's the responsibility of the governance committee to put together a document, perhaps with John's and or Merle's guidance, that could be available for public use, that we could promote best practices.
I think that's a great idea. Our graphic designer, webmaster here is putting together like a cheat sheet for us, those of us who produce documents, in terms of ADA compliance. So I can share that when it's ready, but it won't be, it won't be complete, but at least there'll be something there.
Great.
Okay. I think that's a great idea. And
Yeah,
all
and Cindy, if we have an opportunity to put this into practice, I know we're up against some deadlines here, but the social studies conference, the fundraising event in Greenwich, like this is an opportunity early on for us to say, here's the document we're sort of living and working by.
Yeah. That's great. And I think I need to get more information from the participants at the conference. Definitely didn't include everything we need on that registration form. So I think sometime fairly soon, we'll be sending out a survey for that with all the information we need, and part of that can be including some of these types of questions and being ready to answer as to why we included these questions, why it's important. And yeah, this idea of modeling good behavior, I think, is going to be a big role in the next few years.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So anything else in that number 3 IGA section? Other business. I did want to bring up, have you guys seen the bill put forth about the hotel tax going toward C2 250? Okay.
Yeah, we've had a couple of, so there are a couple funding pathways right now. That one proposed by Jason Rojas. I was in the room with him when we were talking about that. So I don't know. He was picking a pathway to have a high level conversation by targeting the taxes, but I think his goal is to get it through bonding. And that would mirror Kathy Austin's Senate bill proposal to include $30 million of bond funding for the 250th. So there's some fairly senior legislators that are taking on our, the mantle of funding the 250th. So it's exciting, and fingers crossed it all goes through.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And I liked the tie to because I know that tourism is trying to make a connection there. And so I thought it made a lot of sense to have the, from hotels to eventual tourism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other business to discuss?
I'm sorry, Ariane, you want to go first?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. Just real quick. So I saw there was the March Declaring Freedom Conference. This is day 3. There's day 1 and 2. I'm sorry, Megan and I were curious about that. Could I get re-forwarded whatever invites or info? Because I'd definitely like to know, are we allowed to go to that, or how does that work?
I don't know. Allowed is probably, I'm sure I can get space made for any commissioners that would really like to attend days 1 and 2. I'll say days 1 and 2 are designed for teachers and middle and high school students. So there's really no part of those days that's for the general public. That said, if we feel strongly that we want commission members there, I'm happy to see if there's any process that we would have to follow to go there. But day 3 is the day being hosted by the commission. There is also a day 4 that is being hosted by the Association for the Study of Connecticut History, and it is their spring, I forget what it's called, their spring gathering of their organization, and that day is geared towards small and medium-sized historical sites and their staff. So I am happy to share that information. I just have less control over who's able to go and isn't, if that makes sense.
So day 3 is really the main day for us. I have it on my calendar, so I plan to go.
Me too,
Okay.
if that's permissible.
Yeah, I would love to see as many commissioners there as possible. I will resend that information because I do need I would like commission members to register just so that we are providing lunch. So I want to make sure that I have the correct count for lunches. That's really it.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, and I had one last item which I will file as food for thought, putting it into the chat. The first item is the rules that regulate the proceedings of the Senate of the state of Connecticut. So these are basically the Pledge of Allegiance is recited at the beginning of the session. And then the second one is the law governing all the boards. Board of Education in schools, they recite Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning. A lot of municipal meetings, town council meetings to this very day, Boards of Education meetings, all cite the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the meetings, including the legislature on opening day. So I just wanted to share that as historical food for thought.
With respect, Michael, to the proceedings of the commission, because I don't think historically we have said the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay.
Just, I mean, the legislature is historic, and then here's statute governing. We still do it in all the schools. Just
Yeah.
as far as like who's participating, what their expectations might be, how do meetings get started generally? I mean, the executive branch is, which empowers this body, is separate from the legislature to a certain extent, but the governor comes on opening day and they do, you know, he's invited to come, and before that they see, yeah, before that they do the Pledge of Allegiance for the whole legislature, and a prayer invocation too. So just wanted to share that. It's a procedural thing.
Okay.
All right. Great. Well, I think we're right on time. So, Cindy, I can connect with you separately about what we're sending on to Merrill and John.
Perfect. I was just gonna say the same. Yeah. All right.
All right. So I guess I'll see most of you guys next month at the conference.
Yeah, sounds great.
Nice.
Good to see all of you.
All right. Good seeing you.